Hey YouTube, how you guys doing? My name is Kyle, you know me as Dragonmar, and welcome to a new video. Today guys, we'll be talking about signs of being a bad Sentinel. I've got some really good stuff in here I think you guys are going to enjoy a lot. Hopefully you don't see too many of these in your own gameplay. If you guys don't know, I am streaming daily for the month of January on Twitch at twitch.tv/Dragonmar. And as you guys know, I am a Game Leap partner. And because I've reduced my coaching hours significantly to stream more, I want you guys to know that Game Leap is a great alternative to my individual coaching, as you can get 100+ hours of premium Valorant content that's updated daily on GameLeap.com at a fraction of my coaching prices. And make sure you guys use discount code Dragonmar for 25% off your subscription, which of course also helps support the channel. And the links to all of that are down below. And with that being said, let's jump into the video. Starting things off with sign number one that you're a bad Sentinel, and that is that you lurk too often on attack. Now, this is something I think we see a lot in our games. In my coaching sessions, I see this a lot as well. A lot of people look at Sentinels not so much as supports, and more so as opportunities to maybe just throw a trip or a turret down and start lurking. This is a big problem, and as I said, I'm talking about attack here. Now, the reason this is so bad is because what ends up happening is instead of playing with your teammates, you actually are just putting them down a player for whatever site take they're going for. And instead of a 5v5, now they're in a 4v5 because you're off doing, God knows what on whatever site somewhere, right? And this is a big problem. It's not to say you can't lurk as a Sentinel. Actually, I think that's probably one of the best roles for it. We've seen pro players like Steel from 100 Thieves do very well lurking, especially with Killjoy and Cypher. And I think that there's a lot of room for players in our games to do that too. The problem is that when you do it too often, when your teammates need you, that's a huge problem because you are useful to players on attack, even as a Sentinel. Your cages on Cypher are great to be used in place of smokes, or your camera, or using Killjoy's turret or mollies to help push back enemies on attack as well. Do not think of yourselves as just lurkers. If you're lurking too often, that's a bad sign. Now, sign number two of being a bad Sentinel is that you never make first contact on defense. This is the lack of aggression or the over passive playstyle. This is a big problem for new Sentinel players and for Sentinel players who maybe aren't so confident in themselves. What ends up happening is that these players will focus entirely on their abilities as the sole source of pressure, contact, map control, whatever, as opposed to their actual character and what they can do with their movement and their own gun. What you see here often is that instead of peeking and seeing if they can take a fight, instead they'll wait for the trips to go off, the turret to go off, whatever it is, or the alarm bot. They'll check camera for stuff. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but I am saying if you do it every single time, that is bad. Let me tell you why. First and foremost, you become too predictable. One thing I talk to my players about, the players I coach all the time, and even in my videos, is that when you are too predictable, you're giving away valuable information. When you never change up how you play, the enemy team knows too much about you, and that is bad. Second, you're never applying pressure to the map, never going for map control, never trying to control orbs and apply pressure forward. If you don't do that, the enemy team is going to walk all over you and farm you. This is why it's really important that when you are playing defense, even as a Sentinel, you sometimes try to make the first contact. Swing them every couple rounds. Don't just wait for them to pressure you. Even if your trip or your turret or whatever hasn't gone off yet, try to apply some forward pressure. You don't have to do this every round. I'm just saying maybe once or twice a half is good, because you want to set the precedent that, hey, I can push forward. I can apply pressure here, because if you don't, your playstyle is too predictable and they're going to run over you. Sign number three, and I'm going to be talking to a lot of you guys right now, is that you don't call out what you see on the minimap. Guys, you're playing a Sentinel. I know you. I know what you're doing. Half of you guys are staring at walls, staring at boxes, waiting for something of your utility to happen. Whether it's the tripwire to go off, or the turret to start shooting, or the alarm bot so you can pop a molly. I know how you guys play, okay? I've watched you. I've watched hundreds of you. And if you can sit there and wait for that, and you're telling me you can't look at your minimap and make a call out for your team, there is no excuse there. If you're playing a Sentinel, I need you guys to be more vocal, okay? That is ridiculous. Make call outs, help your team. You are already sitting there like a damn statue. Make use of yourself, okay? Sign number four is that you use the same exact setups every single round. So at some point, the enemy team is going to understand how you're playing on your site, okay? And when they do, you don't want them to know exactly what you're going to do in the next round, and then round after that, and the round after that, okay? If you guys only know one setup, whether it's Cypher, or Killjoy. I mean, obviously Sage, with a wall, but Cypher, Killjoy, you need to figure out more, okay? Even if it's just a little adjustment. That's all it takes sometimes, because what ends up happening is that either they'll figure out a way to avoid it. If it's a trip, maybe they'll go over it or something, or they'll just satchel it. Or if it's Killjoy stuff, once again, most likely going to satchel it, or they'll know where to shoot to blow it up, things of that nature. But regardless, if they're ready for it, that's not good. You want to catch people off guard, especially with Killjoy mollies, which, by the way, do some of the sneakiest DPS in the game. I mean, those things catch up on you quick. So if you can move those around, very, very smart. But remember, like I said in what was it, tip number 2, in sign number 2, don't get predictable, right? This is a part of being too predictable, is that you guys do the same thing over and over, the same setup every single round. Turret here, molly here, camera here, trip here. No, you have to change it up and move your position around with it so that they don't know where you are either. Sign number 5 that you're a bad Sentinel is that you are too worried about the scoreboard. Guys, holy moly, you're playing a Sentinel. What do you think the scoreboard's going to look like? Yeah, you're probably going to be at the bottom of it, okay? Gosh, that's not a bad thing, okay? Very important for people to understand this. If you're looking at the scoreboard, you're like, damn, I'm at the bottom. I want to be at the top. I'm playing horrible. Like, okay, first of all, you probably don't understand your role. Second of all, no, you're still probably contributing in ways that maybe aren't always visible on the scoreboard. Much like an Omen, by the way, my smokes are very useful. We wouldn't take sites without them, but guess what? That doesn't show up on the scoreboard. Doesn't mean I'm playing poorly all the time. I mean, sometimes, okay, I do have some struggles, but what's really important here is that if you are someone who constantly looks at the scoreboard as a Sentinel and you're worried about your score, I'm sorry, that is just not the rule for you. When you're playing a Sentinel, you need to be worried about a few things, right? Anchoring sites, covering lurks, and supporting your team, okay? You're not the entry fragger. You're not a duelist. You're not equipped for that kind of stuff. Yes, you still have to hit your shots, but your job is much different. You're not going to be the first one in, the high-flying fragger. That's not you. That's not what your ultimates do either, right? They create space, provide information, okay? That is what you're focused on. Do not play a Sentinel if you're just going to stare at the scoreboard and obsess over your score or your KDA all day. Sign number 6 is that you have no spike plants, okay? If at the end of the game you ever see a Sentinel who never planted the spike, first of all, they better have lost every single round on attack. That is unbelievable. But what I want to say here is that I'm not saying a Sentinel has to plant every round. Like, that's ridiculous, especially because you should be cycling bomb plants for your teammates' ultimates, just so you guys know. If you have a free site and someone's close to an ult, give them the spike to plant, right? That's common sense. But what's very important to understand is the role of every player. Right, you've got your duelists, who are your entries. They're the guys going in first. They're the guys with flashes, movement abilities, help them get in, secure kills, take control. You got your supports, who are more, your initiators and controllers, who are more fitted to kind of following those guys in, allowing them to entry with flashes or smokes. Then you've got your Sentinels, right? Who are more so hanging back, maybe covering flanks as you're going in, setting up trips and things of that nature. They're the guys holding the spike, right? Because you don't want those guys going in first. You don't want your spike carrier dying right away, right? That's pointless, because then they know what the spike is immediately. It might be in a bad spot as well, and you have to play, bomb retrieval. That's never fun. That's why it's the job of Sentinels, for the most part, to carry the spike. So if you guys are finding that at the end of your game, you're checking that scoreboard and you're seeing no spike plants, you might want to reconsider what the role is within the team that you're playing, and if potentially Sentinel could be the wrong sort of role for you. Tip number 7, mainly for Cypher and Killjoy, kind of hard here for Sage to do this one, is that you get flanked on attack often. The job of Cypher, in my opinion, on attack, is to put trips down on flanks so that the enemy can never pressure forward unless without getting tripped, right? They just can't walk through your flanks, okay? Now, obviously, there are some creative ways to get through trips, whether it's Shrouded Step with Omen, jet updrafts, or something of that nature. That's a different story. What I'm talking about is if you're playing something like Haven, right? And people keep coming around behind and killing you, and you're playing a Sentinel, that's on you, right? That's your fault. You need to figure out a way to cover those flanks. Now, with Killjoy, it's a little harder. Obviously, with the turret nerfs, it's been a little bit different in how you can kind of place the turret. I still think there are some worthwhile turrets on flanks to cover certain things. Maybe not always, but this really is for Cyphers nowadays. You guys, first of all, you need to stay alive so that your utility stays up, but you want those trips to be covering flanks. It's very important, right? Now, this shouldn't be your only job. You shouldn't just stare at a flank the entire time. Like I said, that's kind of in the lurking category. We want to stay away from lurking too often. So when your team is pushing, make sure you guys are still pay attention to the map and you're there with your team, right? You still want to support your teammates, but it is your job, in my opinion, to cover flanks in most situations. Make sure you're using your utility to the best of your ability. With Killjoy, Alarm Bot can help a lot as well. If the turret can't always see everything, sometimes you can split those up with where they're positioned. That can help a lot too. Sign number 8 that you're a bad Sentinel is that you don't support or ever trade out your entries. Okay, let's talk about this, right? First and foremost, it is not your sole job to cover flanks, okay? I know I talked about how important covering flanks is, but once, like what I said, like if your team is entering the site, you have to be there with them. So if you are never in a position to get a trade or to help support your entries, you're not playing Sentinel properly. I'm sorry, you're not. Cypher has a great option of using his camera to check close angles for his entries. That's huge. He also got cages. Those are huge. I mean, you've literally got smokes that tell you if people are walking through them. That's pretty cool. That's pretty useful. That could be used on attack. Killjoy, excuse me, you have a turret that has aimbot. It kind of sucks, but excuse me, it can see where people are. Let your teammates know. You've got mollies to clear out tough angles as well. I mean, come on. Then you got Sage as well. Sage has a wall to help support people to get into sites. She's got slows to keep people pinned down on site as well. Guys, just because you're not the entry does not mean you cannot support your teammates, okay? If you're never there to trade kills, I'm sorry, but you're out of position. You're not playing your role correctly on attack, right? You're not just some statue who needs to be staring at a flank the entire game, okay? You need to be going in with your teammates and supporting them. And if you find that you're not doing this, like I said before, rethink if playing a Sentinel is the right role for you. On a similar note, sign number 9 is that you are often the first one dead. This is a sign that you are playing too aggressive and that the role of a support or a Sentinel in this case is probably not the right one for you, right? If you find that you're first one dead, that means you're probably going for aggressive peaks and putting yourself into positions where you're either untradeable or are just in a bad spot, right? And I think that at the end of the day, what we have to realize is that Sentinels are literally almost always dry peeking, right? Like, what are they? There's no flashes. You know, Sage isn't throwing a flash, right? Cypher sometimes can get away with the camera bait, right? He puts the camera, checks. They might shoot it, or he doesn't go into it. Then he swings off of that. Killjoy has the turret, which is actually kind of good to put and then peek off of that. But at the end of the day, guys, if you're dying first often on Sentinels, ooh, you want to reconsider how much aggression you're putting into it. You know, I talk about this a lot, especially with people like Coach, is the right amount of aggression, right? I think a lot of players either are too much or too little. They're too passive. Everybody has to find a balance, okay? This is really important for players to understand. There is a balance between over-aggression and being too passive, and that's what we're all looking for. That's what we're all trying to develop. And if you're dying first too often in your games, chances are you're too aggressive, you're either out of position, or you need to be on a different agent, right? Not a Sentinel, because that's not how you play that role. And finally, sign number 10 that you're a bad Sentinel is that you struggle with any gun that's not a rifle. There are a lot of players who really, really rely on rifles to get kills, right? And then on guns like Spectre and Stinger, they really struggle. And the problem with that is that when you're playing a Sentinel, sometimes you have to kind of come into this situation where you're choosing, am I going to buy full armor rifle and no utility? Or am I going to go, you know, full armor Spectre, full utility, or half armor Spectre, full utility, or half armor, you know, Vandal, some utility, right? Like there's all these different combinations. Oftentimes you're better off getting the utility, because that is what makes you so good at what you do, right? The kits of Sentinels are built around the utility. If you do not buy them, your role of being a support, of being a site anchor, of being someone who can cover flanks and catch lurks and things like that, you're kind of throwing that out the window, right? Like, it's one thing if Omen doesn't buy like a paranoia, right? Because like that's not the end of the world. He still has his smokes, right? That's a passive. But on a Sentinel, right? Like, if you don't buy trips on Cypher, or you don't buy the mollies on Killjoy, like, what are you even playing? You know what I mean? That's why it's super important that if you find yourself struggling with anything but a rifle, you got to start putting more practice in. Because let me tell you, I see Sentinels in my games all the time with SMGs during gun rounds, and they do fine. The reason they do fine, they know how to play off their abilities, which is an incredibly important part about playing a Sentinel. So if you cannot use guns other than rifles, and you kind of crutch onto the rifle instead of buying utility with full armor and a SMG or something, yeah, definitely time to rethink what's going on, what your problems are, and things you can work on. And guys, that's going to conclude the video. Thank you so much for watching, and we've got some really exciting things coming up in the future. I cannot wait for episode 2, I believe, right? Episode 2, Act 1. Cannot wait for that. Going to be a lot of fun. Hope to see you guys on Twitch. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, tap that bell. Let me know when you see you next, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy, and peace.